Good morning, Year 9s. Today I want to tell you about the History Checkpoint coursework to let you know what's going on. First thing I want to do is show you this right here. This tells you everything you need to know. It is quite a long document, but don't worry. It's really quite easy to understand, I hope. So, your question is, who caused the Cold War? And the way you're going to answer it is you're going to look at two statements. The Cold War was the USA showing that they were the dominant world power, or the Cold War was the USSR controlling every country they could. So we're going to use those two statements on one continuum, and we're going to say, where do you place your opinion and why? So on one side, it's the USA's fault, dominating everyone. The other side is the USSR controlling everyone. How far along that continuum is it that you will be able to answer who caused the Cold War? Now, your paper is going to be between 1,800 and 2,000 words. You need that many words in order to be able to do what I need you to do. So please don't freak out that it's a lot of words. It actually evolves really quick, and you probably end up having to worry about having too many words. So each topic, and I'll explain the topics in a second, will have 200 to 250 words. And basically each paragraph will be 100 to 125 words. So that's actually the paragraph. The words count that you're looking at is 125 words per paragraph. You'll have a 100-word introduction and a conclusion for each chapter. I'll explain that in a second. And an overall introduction and conclusion will be about 100 to 300 words. Now I'll explain exactly how all that breaks down. The big thing you just need to remember, that's your end goal words, and when you write your paragraph, 100 to 125 words is your paragraph, which is very short paragraphs. I think that's about 100 words. Let's just take a look together. That's 44 words. If I go down here to this paragraph just to highlight it, get you an idea, 82 words. So you're looking for paragraphs about the length of these together. So it's not too far. So just to let you know, you only have to get information from your textbooks. Okay? And I'm just going to say the textbook because there's the two textbooks that you have are the same. So you are allowed to just use the textbook and the information in Google Classroom. So you can use all the videos that I have for you, and you can use your textbook. You do not need to research anything. You do not need any charts. You may include them, but you do not need them. Also, you do not need to reference anything. Since everything's coming from what I gave you, you don't need to reference anything. If it's something very different, you could always say, according to this source that I read, and then give me a link of where that is. Or I know some of you talk to your parents according to my grandmother, according to my father, then you can just throw those in there. That way I know that you got the source from something else. Okay, now I want to take a look at this outline. This is the way your paper is going to look, and if you follow this outline, you'll be able to reach your word limit without any problem. So we're back to what our question is. Who caused the Cold War? Is it the USA being dominant, or is it the USSR trying to control everything? So which is it? So you're going to look at all four chapters, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. And the first thing, so let's go over chapter 4. Think about what's in chapter 4. We've got our Berlin blockade. We've got communism versus capitalism, Truman Doctrine. Those are the ones that just popped out of my head when I was thinking about this. But you can look through your book and think, okay, which do I want? Now, think about the fact you need to answer the question, who caused the Cold War? Was it the USA or was it USSR? So let's just take Berlin blockade, for example. Berlin blockade was a big source of tension during the Cold War. Okay? Now you're going to write 2 paragraphs about the Berlin blockade, explaining why the Berlin blockade caused one side or the other side problems that made them start the Cold War, to blame them on the Cold War. Okay, so you've got 2 paragraphs you're going to write. So your first topic right here, that would be like Berlin blockade. So let me just kind of give you an example right here. So if I copy this This topic's going to be Berlin blockade. Then I'm going to write one paragraph why it was the USSR's fault. And I could write a second one why it was the USSR's fault. Or I can take and say, okay, no, I'm going to do one, why is it the USSR's fault? Why is it the US fault? Or I can take it here and say, two, why was it the US's fault? Why was it the US's fault? So this here is answered like your normal B question, okay? You come up with, you would basically be answering the Berlin blockade, explain how the Berlin blockade was the USSR's fault. Or explain how the Berlin Wall or the Berlin blockade was a source of tension in the Cold War. That's probably the better idea. Explain why the Berlin blockade was a source of tension in the Cold War. So you explain one reason why it's the US's fault, and then, okay, it's definitely the US's fault. Why is it the US's fault again? Or here, why is it was USSR's fault? I'm going to put that back in. Or here, why is it the USSR's fault again? Whichever way you want to do it. Then you've got to come up with another topic. I like the Truman Doctrine. You could also just use Marshall-Lader domino theory. You don't have to use the full Truman Doctrine. Okay, it's the same thing. You're going to answer this question again. Why was the Truman Doctrine a source of tension in the Cold War? Okay, so then you're going to answer that question. We don't need that pound sign. So, again, why was it the USSR's fault? Or, why was it the USSR's fault? Or, why is it the USS's fault on one side and the USSR on the other side? Or, two paragraphs about why it's the USS's fault. So you can choose, and you're going to have two paragraphs. Okay? You'll have a topic, two paragraphs, a topic, two paragraphs. Okay, now, the one thing that is required in each section, you have to have it balanced. So the way I have it set up right here, one for USSR, one US, one US, one US, that's fine. But if this was the US, this would not be fine, because it's all blamed on the US, and it has to be balanced. It has to be at least one on one side, three on the other. It can be two and two, but it has to be at least one on one, three on the other. Okay, so as you see, that becomes a C question. First you write your introduction. You could even say in chapter 4, it's a discussion of the setting up the communism with our communism versus capitalism, setting up the Cold War. Then you take, the main topics I want to talk about is the Berlin blockade and Truman Doctrine. And so then you can write these out, your paragraphs out, write these paragraphs out, and finally it says in this chapter, who caused the Cold War? So then you have to answer. So as you can see in the beginning, it was, and according to this, the USA's fault because, and then you reiterate what you said. Okay, now I'm going to erase this, but in class today you guys can start your own and start filling this out. So that actually is the best way to do it, is to take a look and just fill this out. And it is perfectly acceptable if you do it exactly what I did. Although, if I was actually doing this, I would do one here, USSA, USSR, USSA, USSR, if I was doing this one here. Now you're going to do that again with chapter 5. So you're going to say, okay, now I'm going to look at chapter 5. Who caused the Cold War in chapter 5? Was it the USA being dominant, or was it the USSR being controlling? Then I will do the same thing. I will come up with some topics. I've given you lots of topics. Cuba, the Missile Crisis, Cuban Bay of Pigs, Cuban Revolution, Korea, General MacArthur, Korea, Success for Containment, USS Involvement, Vietnam, the Fighting Styles, the U.S. Involvement, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, or Public Opinion. or anything else that you can come up with in Chapter 5. This is just some things to get your brain jogging. So you go ahead and write a topic there, whichever one you want. Then why is it USA's fault? Why is it USSR fault? Or both for USA or both for USSR? This one, of course, might be a little bit hard to come up with why is it the USSR's fault. So try to think of one way. Oh, actually, Cuban Missile Crisis. There you go. I'm sure one of them should be Cuban Missile Crisis, one of these, and then boom, you've got easily a USSR's fault. So that's my suggestion. Leave one Cuba at least. Makes it easier to get both-sided opinions. Okay? So then you go down to Chapter 6. Same thing. Who was the fault of the Cold War? Okay? Take a look at these. Come up with your two topics. Come up with your paragraphs. Again, here you might have problems coming up with the USA side. I'll think about it and see if I can come up with something to help you in class. Okay, then you have an overall conclusion. You need to answer the overall conclusion. Then I would go back up and finally write your overall introduction. So each one of these paragraphs should be about 100 words. So if we go back to here, when I was talking about the paragraphs, each paragraph should be about 100 to 125 words. That's that. This is each topic. Should be about 200, 250 words. Let's go back. Each topic. So that should be about 200, 250 words. Okay? If you follow that, here's your introduction and your conclusion. That's right here. Let me pull that up. 100 words for introduction and conclusion. So that means your introduction can be like 10, 15 words, and your conclusion then could be 85 to 90 words. This introduction and this conclusion that I'm referring to is this introduction here and this conclusion here. Okay, let's go back and look at the word count. Overall introduction and conclusion should be around 100 to 300 words. Okay, again, that could be 20 words for your overall introduction and 280 words from your conclusion. So introductions are usually very short, but it tells you what you're going to do. The conclusion is where your opinions come in. So overall introduction and conclusion, let me point that out to you. Here's your overall introduction. Here's your overall conclusion. So that would be 100 to 300 words, those two together, not each, together. Okay, so I hope that gets you started thinking about how many words you need, how you're going to write it. Now I want to tell you a little bit about how grading it. Now these are all the words here. I'm not going to read the words. I'm just going to explain it to you. So, remember how I said this is kind of written like a B question? So you've got your topic that you come up with and the two paragraphs. Well, this is going to be graded like a B question. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 B questions because there's 6 topics. 6 times 6 is 36. So if I go back here, your paragraphs, 36 points. This explains what I've just said previously, so you can either read it again on your own or listen if you don't understand. Okay, next thing. This here is written like a C question. Introduction, except I'm asking for 4 paragraphs where normally I ask for 3 paragraphs. At least 1 on one side, then 3 on the other. So this is graded like a 10-point question. Okay, this is graded like a 10-point question, so that's 2. And this is graded like a 10-point question, that's 3. So there's 3 10-point questions. Each 10-point question is worth 30 points. I'm sorry, each 10-point question is worth 10 points times 3, 30 points total. Okay, now one thing I want to tell you, I do know if you have weak paragraphs here, that would normally pull down your 10-point question points. But as long as your structure is fine, if your paragraphs are weak here, You will not lose points for your 10-point question. So this is the one time that I'm going to be very, very generous in my 10-point questions, because you're already losing points because of the B question. So you're not going to lose questions because you've messed up the paragraph, so therefore it's bad in the B, and lose 10 points because of the C. So as long as you give me an introduction and 2 paragraphs, one on one side, one on the other, so you give me that structure, one on one side, 3 on the other. As long as it's balanced and there's enough paragraphs, you can get 10 points easy. So that should be an easy 30 points for you. Then I'm going to look at the entire chapter and think, how well did this chapter go? Okay, that explains it right here. Okay, so overall, you should have, if you have a nice balanced paper, you should have one side that basically will say it's the USA's fault, one side that'll probably say the USA's fault, one side that'll probably say the USSR fault. So my guess is most people are going to end up saying this is the USA's fault being controlling, this is the USSR's fault being, this is the USSR's fault being controlling, and this is the USA's fault being domineering. That's generally what those 2 chapters are about. Then it comes down to whose fault is it here in the introduction. So like I say, this is going to be most likely USA's fault, this will be most likely USSR's fault, this can be either. So then when you come down and write your overall conclusion, it will be a very nice balanced conclusion because you'll have 1 on one side and 2 on the other. Okay? Or you'll want to give this 50-50 blame here on chapter 4, and then you will give it 50-50 blame here. If you do give something 50-50 blame, your conclusion always has to be longer, explaining why you did that. So it's never a good idea to do that. So now, when I look at the overall conclusion, I'm going to look at how well did you do. Okay, here's your passing points. 18 or higher is passing points. Now this is very complicated, and it comes from the assessment for your coursework that you'll be turning into IGCSE. But basically what it says is you are able to use a lot of good information, you select a lot of information, you are able to understand the key features, you produce things that are relevant, and you create a good judgment. As you go down, it'll get not so good. So this is, you did some relevant, accurate stuff. You used some relevant information. You demonstrated some understanding. You demonstrated some good understanding of interrelationship. You placed some judgment, and you were able to somewhat argue. This goes down, you did it, well, less than some. So this is excellent. This is, how about excellent, good, some. So let's change this to some. Not any good, horrible. Okay? So 18 is your lowest passing grade. You did everything excellently, you did it okay, you did it somewhat, you did it poorly, it's did bad. If anyone gets here, I'm going to cry. Just tell you that right now. Okay, so then the other thing I have here is the same thing. I have the mark scheme of how to mark just the B and the C question, in case you wanted to remember again how to mark B and C questions. Okay, so if it's all clear, you can go ahead and stop. All I'm going to do is repeat myself. I'm going to go ahead and repeat it one more time for people who need it, and I'm going to do it very quickly this time because you can also just go back and listen. Okay, so have fun and enjoy for those who are leaving, and those who are sticking around, stick around. So again, the question is who caused the Cold War? Is it the United States being dominant, or is it the USSR being controlling? So right now you should have somewhat opinion in your head. You're going to put it on a scale and say it's USA's fault, USS's fault, someone in the middle. Then for each chapter, you're basically going to write a C question that you're going to basically come up with the question, who caused the Cold War in chapter 4? Who caused the Cold War in chapter 5? Who caused the Cold War in chapter 6? In order to write that, you're going to explain 2 topics. Okay, so the topic could be communist versus capitalism is what caused the Cold War in chapter 4. And then you're going to write one paragraph about why on one side and one paragraph on the other. The easiest way to do chapter 4 is do USA on one side, USR on the other side. So chapter 2, topic 2, then maybe explain the Marshall Plan. Why is it the USA's fault? Why is it the USSR fault? And then you come up with a conclusion. This will be a balanced paragraph. But go ahead and still try to assign blame to one side or the other. Okay, then you do that with chapter 5, chapter 6, and then you write an overall conclusion. 2,000 words. Do not worry about the word count. Just write the paper and then look. Okay, good luck. I hope by the time we get to break, all of your questions will be clear. This is due right after we get back from break. Bye-bye.